Good evening, everyone. We're delighted to have you as a part of our group and hope your learning journey with us has been very, very smooth. I'm very glad to present the sixth session of our Learning Weekend series. And I'm really extremely excited to be hosting today's topic, which is enhancing productivity through feedback with Rajan Kalia. I'm Kashish, your host for today, and please join me in welcoming Rajan on this platform. Welcome, Rajan. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Kashish, and thank you for the opportunity. It's really nice to see that there are people who are learning on a Saturday evening. I very rarely see some people who are keen to learn on a Saturday evening, but I'm really glad that the core HRIR group is working towards learning of people, and I'm really happy to be part of this learning journey for everybody in HR.
Thank you, Rajan. It's an honor for us to have an expert like you with us. So, thank you for agreeing to be a part of this learning platform. And I'm sure everyone else uh, would be really feeling the same as we go on through the webinar. So, we'll start with a brief introduction about the core HRIR group before we really formally begin today's topic. So I would not take much time, probably just 5 to 7 minutes. And what I would like to talk about is about the formation of the group, the vision, the mission, how we have progressed as a group. So we were formed basically sometime around last year in January 2017, and our intent was to build a platform for HR professionals, essentially to share knowledge, experience, expertise, connect with each other, and find solutions to different issues or different concerns. Probably share the latest best practices or the latest laws that come up, latest compliances, etc., etc. So the group has approximately 800 odd people. No, I think it's 1,000. My bad. It's more than 1,000 people on LinkedIn. Talking about our WhatsApp group, we already have more than 400 people. And then overall, the group consists of people who have experience from 3 to approximately 35, 36 odd years, which is by far the widest range of experience that I have ever seen as a part of any HR, any professional HR group. So this is about the group. Now, apart within the group, we have HR experts, we have leaders, we have CHROs from Fortune 500 companies as well. And otherwise, the companies are from India, as well as we have some global conglomerates in the team also. Apart from that, I think the vision of the company is the group is to be essentially an internationally renowned one-stop platform for sharing, learning, growing together for the entire HR fraternity. And hence, keeping in line with the vision, the group has come up with 5 different initiatives from time to time, and I'll be glad to list out those initiatives. The first initiative that the group came up with was WhatsApp group, which is essentially a highly interactive platform with active real-time conversations happening around latest compliances, labor laws, HR technologies, real case studies, scenarios, solution, and some of the high octane discussions. And then we have our Chai Buddy series, or our HR conclave sessions, where we invite speakers, experts, and leaders from the industry to conduct interactive sessions and share their expertise on different interesting topics and new concepts. The Chai Buddy series is essentially conducted every alternate month. So the next Chai Buddy series you can hope to attend is towards the end of September. Apart from this, we have our Learning Weekend series, which we are into right now. We do these Learning Weekend series or webinars every fortnight, and our effort is that we should try and connect you with the thought leaders of the corporate world who have valuable experience in their sphere. They have unbeatable expertise and I would say absolute command in the area that they operate in. We recently did a debut of Shining HR Award, which was in the month of July and was a part of our Chai Bari series. So essentially, we created this platform for recognizing some of the outstanding achievers whose contribution was really commendable, or they were the idea powerhouses. They came up with some new ideas and the young talent in the HR fraternity. So this award category is essentially for HR professionals who have less than 10 years of experience, and this award is uh, out for nominations every 6 months. So the last award that we conducted, the award series that we conducted was in July. So the next one is, you can expect it to be around October or November ideally. Right now, we're also coming up with our own website. And as soon as it is out, I'm sure we would announce it with real pomp and show. But something that will be a part of that website would be a job board, which will be a web page, which will be completely dedicated to the open positions for the HR professionals. So we are collaborating with various executive search firms and recruitment firms as well to bring in job opportunities flowing in from different parts of the world. Rajan, we would need the PPT on the screen, please.
This is the only slide I have.
I cannot see this. So we're trying to locate the PPT. I mean, can we have the PPT?
Sure. Can you see it?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. So this was about the group as such. I would like to move on to give everyone a bit of introduction about our today's thought speaker, who is Rajan Kalia. So Rajan essentially is the co-founder for Salto Feed Day and Karma Notes. He founded this organization in 2011. But overall, he has 26 years of rich and varied experience in human resource function as such, out of which 15 plus years has been into the organizational transformation. The significant contributions have been in the areas of probably, setting up HR functions, formulating the philosophy, strategy, and policies of the organization, the performance management, compensation, feedback, and talent management. For the past, he's worked with over 80 clients in varied sectors, including Fortune 100, global and Indian private and public sector companies. He's worked with companies like Max New York Life Insurance, where he was with them for 10 years. He's worked with Aisha Consultancy, Coca-Cola, Balapur Industries, and Aisha before he finally decided to float his own consulting firm, which has been doing tremendously well. As we discussed, that he's worked with over 80 clients. And Rajan, interestingly, is one of the most sought after speakers in the HR forums. He does regular contributions on Twitter as well as on LinkedIn. He's trained by Harvard Business Publishing in case study methodology, by DDI in performance management and coaching, and by SHL in OPQ assessment, which is essentially occupational personality questionnaire assessments, and by Right Management in the leadership program. The domains that he has worked across are manufacturing, FMCG, consulting, and financial services. Financial services has been the tenure has been the longest, which was approximately 10 years. So this is about Rajan. I would like to just say a couple of sentences about myself. A small introduction. I have 14 years experience in working across mature as well as startup organizations. So that gave me some bit of exposure in understanding how organizations come up their learning curve and they grow. I have exposure in talent acquisition, retention, development. A very strong focus has been in performance management, drafting the policies, implementing the policies, the processes, change management, succession planning, and most recently, HR analytics. My domains mostly have been in the IT and ITES sector. And I worked with some of the companies in the IT sector, which is Partner Corporation, ITES, which is Dimension India Networks, One Business Consulting, the Smart Cube, etc., etc. So going on to the topic for today, which is enhancing productivity through feedback. I think all of us would understand the importance of ongoing feedback for performance management as compared to the traditional performance management systems that we have seen. So since the humble and informal beginning for the performance appraisals, which was somewhere around in 1900, performance management systems have really evolved over time from being objective to subjective, from being an observation based or experience based to data driven, from being annual to semi-annual to quarterly. Now it is also monthly in some of the organizations, which is still very, very rare. And now we hear that about the concept of regular feedback, which has come to light, and companies have just started experimenting. And Rajan is an expert from that area, from the productivity, how it is linked to the regular feedback mechanism. So essentially, companies have started to realize that in order to greatly improve their productivity of the employees, they have to have a major focus on the regular feedback, and they understand that a regular feedback will have another major impact on the overall profitability of the business. So Rajan, coming from an HR background, I feel the glaring questions our attendees must have in their minds right now are, why feedback is getting so much focus now, and what is the science behind the feedback? And more importantly, how does technology make feedback timely, specific, and relevant?
So thanks, Ashish. I will try to answer all the three questions one by one. So why feedback is getting so much of focus, what's the science, and how does technology enable it? So let's begin with the first one. Why feedback is getting so much focus now? So, let's just look back into the history a bit, and I'll share with you that actually 1940s was the first time that 360-degree feedback started, and you'll be surprised to know that this happened in the German army. So the Nazis were first, actually, who were trying to give 360 feedback in their army. And we saw Drucker talking about management by objectives in 1960s. We saw, the whole advent of bell curve by Jack Welch in the 1980s. And we saw in the 2000s and the 1990s the distortion of bell curve. And people, saying we hate bell curves chant started somewhere in 2015. People said that we want to get away from it and we want to do something else. So it gave rise to the whole concept of ongoing feedback. Though people have been doing that informally, but now how do we get this done formally is what people have been talking about. And there are many people who are trying to solve this riddle. So let's go and talk a little bit about why is so much of focus now. So there are three major things. The first one is the demographics of working population is changing. I'll make the case on how that is happening. There is a huge influx of technology. All of us carry cell phones and smartphones. And there is a disruption in management thinking on the traditional way of hierarchies and organization structure. All three of them are contributing significantly to the feedback being one of the most talked about areas to enhance performance and productivity in organizations. So let's talk about, this is some quick data on millennials. We had around 40% of workforce as millennials in 2016, and 2025 we are looking at 75% of workforce being millennials, or we will have some new name for the people who are going to be coming in, because in 2025 a lot of people who were born in year 2000 are going to be joining the workforce, right? And the current definition of millennials, which is roughly, there are many definitions, and one of the definitions is people who were born after 1991 are millennials. So this is one of the reasons why. And what do millennials want? They want to share responsibility both at home and at workplace. So they ask a lot of questions, and most of their questions are starting from why do I need to do this, which is irritating to a lot of people, especially my generation. They want work-life balance. They'd say that we don't want only work, work, work. They want instant feedback. They say that if I'm doing something right or wrong, tell me now instead of telling me 3 months later or 6 months later when the performance management comes into play or organizations have a formal assessment of performance. And lastly, they're
Absolutely.
driven by purpose. So if you're driven by purpose, you constantly want to be on the path to that purpose rather than only to where your organization is taking you. The second point, influx of technology. Some numbers. In 2016, we had 3.6 billion users of internet. 2.1 billion users are connected. That means they are all the time on social media and connected through social media. And 5 billion users had mobile phones. Of course, these numbers have undergone a change, and the numbers have only increased. Now look at the mind-boggling numbers we have. And people are saying more and more things should be done instantly and through my mobile phone, which is in my hand. Disruption in the way we work. The org structures are moving from how things were, which is hierarchical, to a little bit of a networking. And lastly, how actually things work. There are many networking circles in an organization rather than one networking aspect which you see. So if you see this chart on the right-hand side, there are many of these networks which constitute work right now. So all these circles talk to each other, and they want to get to know what is happening very, very quickly for the organization to move forward. Um, the PMS is transforming, and the advent is of something called PMS2. If you look at the CEB PMS study, again, a little dated, but 84% companies are looking to change their PMS. But the key question is why? Because they see less value as compared to the time spent. They feel that we've spent a lot of time, but the value we extract from the performance management system is very less as compared to the time spent. The famous Deloitte study, where they spent they found out they're spending millions of hours in performance appraisals with very little return. Actually, they're saying we are losing millions of dollars. They say that it's highly subjective and filled with errors. We know that humans are, we are a sum of our biases, and all of us, including me and you, and everybody has biases, and we operate from those biases. And they are especially very strong about people. And lastly, in HR, we are all guilty of forcing a bell curve, leading to unnecessary competition and heartburns in the organization. This is a puzzle. People want to get away from it. This is a McKinsey quarterly report. I'll just read this to you. The worst kept secret in companies has long been the fact that the yearly ritual of evaluating and sometimes rating and ranking the performance of employees epitomizes the absurdities of corporate life. Now, this is what they say verbatim in that report. Now, this is a very, very strong statement to make. And hence, instead of being guilty about not being able to do anything about it, HR needs to change the way we look at performance. And one of the reasons people feel, and we'll come to science of feedback, people feel disenchanted or demotivated is the way performance management is handled. So the focus is shifting to ongoing feedback rather than a point-in-time feedback. It's coming to feed forward, famous Marshall Goldsmith's word, instead of feedback. And lastly, people are saying, hey, don't only look at my boss, but look at me holistically and look at everybody who's talking about me rather than only one data point. Because usually it's only one data point from my boss, which is taken into consideration in ranking me. It is a very important data point, but that should not be the only data point.
Thank you, Rajan. So, pardon me for creating a disruption right now,
No problem.
but I do remember when you spoke about the performance management system, people spending millions of hours. I can totally relate to what you're saying. I remember my organization spending almost 2 months in doing performance appraisal, which was done half yearly. So 2 months of time was really a humongous task and a humongous amount of time as well. So, in context to the questions that we've already covered, the slides that we've already covered, the content that we've spoken about, I have a few questions from the attendees. If we could take those up, please.
Sure, go ahead.
So the first question that has come up is how does real-time employee feedback help in enhancing productivity, which is the question by Nabarun.
So there are two or three things. It's like, if I know, it's like going on the road. If you want to go from Delhi to Chandigarh and you take the road to Rohtak, somebody has to point it to you when you're reaching Rohtak, hey, you are on the wrong road. Rather than you reaching Hisar or Jaipur and then you figuring out, oh, I was supposed to go to Chandigarh, but I have reached Rohtak. So if you are given ongoing feedback about the work you're doing, and you come to know, oh my goodness, I am doing this wrong. I should be doing it in a different way. You can immediately course correct, and hence save organization, couple of thousands of rupees or lakhs of rupees or millions of dollars by just being on track. Imagine that scenario now with 10,000 people. You're talking about one person, and if all 10,000 people start going in different directions, and instead of them going in different directions, if the supervisors are able to correct them, there's a huge amount of focus which comes on into the productivity bucket, and we can all get aligned to where the organization wants to go rather than where we are going. I will prove the case later about having used the tools in a couple of organizations, how does it impact. But I would stop here on this particular question and take on the next one from you.
Sure. So, in going forward in the same context, when we talk about feedback, how do we judge which feedback can be used for further analysis? As HR professionals, we get a lot of feedback, but using it as a base data for a root cause analysis is a real challenge. Is what Nidhi Sharma is trying to say.
Absolutely. So that's why if you go back to my slide, and this is my last sentence, you have to have a 360-degree feedback in evaluating performance. And you cannot take one data point to say, okay, this is the data point I should work on. And if it is ongoing and it's 360-degree feedback, imagine the number of data points you can generate versus few data points. Let's take a traditional way of evaluating performance. You and your boss sit down, even a half year, and in the half year, your boss talks to you about 3, 4, 5 incidents, and you talk about 3, 4, 5 incidents. So let's say you talk about in total 10 incidents if they're unique. Otherwise, they could be common. So you talk about 4, 5 incidents, and you decide upon the rating or the feedback, and that is only from one source. Now imagine multiplying that by 5, 6 of your peers and 2, 3 of your subordinates. Now first, you spread the feedback from 1% to 10. Number two, the data points they all have about you because they've seen you in different situations and on different days in different moods. So we can take a lot of data, do data analytics on that, and figure out what data is the most important data which we should share with you. And hence, moving away from saying what should HR take into consideration. If you have more data points, your ability to run good analytics and your ability to come to crux of what this person should be improving is far higher because it's
Higher,
multiple
right.
sources. Okay, let's move on, Kashish.
Sure. I'm very eager to see what's in what's in the making now.
Sure. So, coming to feedback, everybody of us understands and knows that getting feedback is very important, and that's the only way we can improve because how people see us is how we are. We may be thinking about ourselves in a different way. We may have a different image of ourselves, but the true image of us is how people see us. But it is very hard. It's very easy, but it's very hard. Also, if you don't have the right tools, it's like akin to organizations. They want employees to give ongoing feedback, but it's like going to an empty gym. If you don't have the tools in a gym, you cannot really improve your body structure or lose weight or anything of that sort. Imagine you saying my intent is to improve my body structure, but you have no weights to work with. So if you want to really want to improve, then you need to have the tools to improve. So how do we implement ongoing feedback model in an organization? Let's start with the science. We know that feedback really works, and I will tell you in a minute how. And we will also share with you what does effective feedback look like and feedback models for organizations. So how feedback works? Feedback is really hard. When it hits you, it's really hard. You feel as if it's a rock which has hit you on your face. The impact is soft, but the outcome is hard. Yeah, the impact is seen as, oh no, I don't really agree with it. Yeah, this is something which people may be saying, but I'm not really like that. But if you really change and you listen to the feedback and you really change, the outcome is something which is something concrete you can change in your work day or in your work life. But it is really hard to give and get feedback. Let's just understand this from the neuroscience perspective. Our psychology is that we confuse our behavior with our identity. This is called a self-affirmation bias, and science has known this bias, and psychology has known this bias, and economics has known this bias for a very long time. When I start to explain my own behavior, I start to explain my behavior because of the circumstances. Oh, I got late because there was a lot of traffic on the road, and this guy, his car was not parked right, blah blah blah. But let's say if I see one of my colleagues coming into the office late, and my instant reaction in my mind, I confuse it with the personality and the identity, and I say, oh yeah, Rajan is always late. It does. My behavior I explain because of circumstances. Somebody else's behavior I explain because of the identity. So we often confuse that. The fallacy of well-roundedness. We want to be seen as complete persons. We want to be seen as completely well-rounded. Oh, I know IR, I know HR, I know performance management, I know recruitment, I know everything about HR, which may not be true. We all know that some of the areas are really strong, and some of the areas we are not so good at. And lastly is in-group or out. Means if somebody points out certain things to us, let's take an example of a HR team, and if somebody says, hey, this guy is very good, but he is not a good listener, but all of us are better listeners, so it isolates me, and I don't want to listen to it. So we actually kind of reject it. And in the process of getting feedback is not consistent in an organization. The information is all scattered. There are random ways we get feedback from all across from various people. We don't have the right tool. And then if we have to improve, we don't see any perceived benefits. So I'm confused first with my identity and behavior, and second, I don't have any tool. Hence, I wash off most of the feedback which is given to me. This is a small little model by which we have explained it. You perform, others observe you. On the left-hand side is positive feedback. On the right-hand side is critical and negative. If it is positive, you feel happy. Does this add value in achieving your goals? Yes. Conscious efforts to sustain that behavior or performance. No, then you let it go. Similarly, critical feedback, emotion, you are indifferent. If you feel feedback is important, will add value in your goal, then you seek validation from people you trust. If they validate it, that's great. If they don't, you let it go. If they validate it, then do you know what is to be done to improve it? You should ask them, oh, okay, Kashish, I think I am not so good at listening. What can I do to improve? And you give me some suggestions, and I make conscious efforts to sustain that behavior or improve on it. That's the way the feedback cycle works. And once we understand this, we can make conscious efforts to sustain our behavior or improve on it. We have also looked at this feedback box. We say people give feedback both positive and negative. And there is feedback which is stale, which is to say, hey, this is what you did, this is how you did, versus this is what you can do, which is on the right hand side, which is feed forward, which is fresh. If it is positive but stale, I feel good. The whole thing is myelin bound. It kind of helps me to give me a second, please.
Sure.
It kind of helps me to the myelin is something which is my nerve connections in my mind, and I feel good about it. The nerve connections become stronger, I feel nice, and it creates dopamine in me. So I feel very good about it. If it is negative and stale, I feel angry because I can't do anything about it that has passed. I feel frustrated saying that, oh, why can't I do anything? And similarly, it still gets reinforced through myelin. If it is fresh, that means it's feed forward. It is propelling. I see that I can do something about it. Once I do something about it, I feel nice. It's self-fulfilling prophecy, and it creates endorphin, which again pulls me and creates nice feelings in me. If it is negative, but if it is actionable, I can look at it and say, hey, I was doing X, but I need to do Y. I need to create new patterns, and it creates a new myelin in my head. That's how the feedback box works. We keep on going up and down between the fresh, both the positive and the negative. That's why you see the red dot right in the middle. We never on the top, we never in the bottom. It keeps on oscillating. The feedback model organization can work with is something which Mark Efron, my partner, has created. It's called the 2+2 coaching model. It's a very simple model. At every month or every quarter, you can ask two simple questions, two comments and goals, the goals you've set for yourself, two things which are going well, two things which need to improve on, and any more comment which I can do better. This is as simple as that. You can also use the feed-forward model, the 6-question model of Marshall Goldsmith, if you so want. So you can use these kind of models to get into feed-forward and also get into ongoing conversations about improving yourself. These kind of conversations help us change our behavior, as you saw from the feedback box.
Great. If we could just take a break. Sorry, Rajan, for this little interruption.
Go ahead.
We have two questions which I feel would relate to what we just discussed. So talking about the acceptance or the negation of the feedback, we have a question which is asked by Anadi Sinha and similar questions by Bhavin Patel. And they're asking how to tackle an emotionally disturbed subordinate to give him feedback for his development. So it relates to the psychology we just discussed.
The first thing is you should not give feedback to an emotionally disturbed person because he or she cannot handle the emotion at that point in time, and whatever you may say will be taken with a pinch of salt, and secondly, negated completely. You should say that I feel, and you can use empathy just to understand the situation rather than giving a feedback at that point in time. Take a pause, take a breather, and maybe give the feedback next day or day after. At that point in time, when the person is upset, there is no point in giving feedback.
Right. Another question is how to verify that feedback given is true, genuine, and not manipulative. This question is from Anurag Chaudhary.
It is very difficult.
Right.
It is very difficult. And the only way to tackle it is to look at data points about that feedback from other people. The validation, if you look at, so let me go back to the model. Yeah, this is the model, right? You're talking about. So if there's a validation, see this, if you seek validation from people you trust, so you should always look at saying that, are other people saying this? And that's why we keep on talking about 360. So if other people are also saying this, then yes, you should look at saying, oh yeah, I got to improve this. This is something which lots of people are saying about me, and hence I got to improve it.
Sure. So we would now be keen to go further into the concept.
Okay. So how can we scale if we have the model, which is a one-on-one model? How can we scale these to the whole organization? The answer is technology, and there is nothing more disruptive than technology today. We all know that technology is making leaps and bounds of effort in all the fields, including HR. We know that there is real-time performance feedback apps which are coming, the real-time engagement apps which are coming, not even apps, there are systems which are coming, recruitment, candidate management, whereby people are, only relying on bots nowadays. We know that there are lots of apps which are helping us improve productivity, the team productivity per se. Of course, mobile learning is the next foray, and we already have lots of LMS like Chapter Vitamins and some of the other. There are lots of them which help you learn bite size, as we know, on mobiles. And lastly, like People Strong Qualify and some other software and mobile applications are helping employees self-service on mobile, right? And everything is done by bots. On the recruitment candidate management, we know that lots of organizations are adopting completely automated process, and sometimes even the humans are not talking for the first few one or two rounds to the prospective candidate. Is done by chatbots. So there is a real disruption which is coming in HR, and the technology firms. If you look at the report from 2017, the total business on in HR on and technology and apps is slated to be $20 billion by 2020. So it's a huge market, and lots of people are trying lots of things. Let's focus a little bit on what we are on the topic, which is real-time performance feedback and team productivity. So both these help us do real-time management of team performance. The goals are published and transparent, and people can see them all the time. They are not filed away somewhere where we can't see them. Simple and easy feedback. There are touch, pinch, swipe kind of models which are there on giving feedback. There are simple things and easy check-ins which are happening. There are 360-degree view of performance, which is again ongoing, mobile on feedback on the go kind of things which are happening. There's some apps, there are some products which are revolutionizing feedback. Therma Notes, which is our own product, so that's one. There is Better Works, there is Embrace, there is Reflective, and there is Small Improvements. All these are disruptive apps and systems which are in the performance management and feedback area, which is coming into play. Reflective is very much US based. Embrace is mostly in Europe. Better Works is in US again, and Small Improvements is in US again, and Karma Notes is here in India and some of the other Asian countries. I'll take a pause and take if there is any other question before I move on to the real-time case study of productivity.
Yes, as a fact of the matter, we do have a very relevant question here, which is put forth by Kamaya Gujarati. And she asks, when we talk about real-time feedback, what are the metrics used to measure productivity?
Yeah, so there are many matrices which organizations are using, but the main matrix which people are using is to see, are we seeing a change in behavior? And if you're seeing a change in behavior, how is that behavior related directly to some of the elements either of revenue or cost or efficiency? So people are directly linking some of these behaviors to all the three things. So once we start using the tools, you can create interlinkages through real-time analytics to say if the behaviors are changing, and you can see when a cohort's behavior, if it is changing, it directly starts impacting their performance on the job. It's like if you have seen if you go back in time and see the 1996 paper on Sears, when the first time they started talking about employee engagement, directly correlating to customer satisfaction is the same kind of model which we can use to see the productivity enhancement for feedback.
All right. There's one point before we just move forward. There's one point which has been put up by Deepak Sharma. He says choosing the wrong form of feedback or communicating incorrectly can severely damage the supervisor-employee relationship or a manager-team member relationship. The most damaging is the use of negative feedback when redirection is in order. So, what would your thoughts be about it?
I think Deepak is absolutely right. Um, this feedback has to be handled very, very sensitively. And if the supervisor has given a critical or a negative feedback, then he should have the tools on how to give this feedback rather than using words which are blunt or bring down the dignity of the individual or hurt them in any other way. Because if you hurt an individual, then you will not be able to get the message across. And many supervisors have and take pleasure in giving negative feedback. And Deepak is right. The only way we can tackle that is through a 360 degrees. If there are other people who are saying the same thing about that same person, then we can perhaps overcome the difficulty Deepak is talking about.
Yeah, very true. So we can go on to talking about the real-time feedback, enabling conversations and improving productivity. I'm very curious to see what is coming forth.
Sure. So this is a case of a mobile feedback application which we use for an organization, a very small case on just talking about feedback and recognition shared, and you will see how some of those started making difference to people. So there's a 10 employees. There were around 689 feedback shared between employees, and there were around 387 recognitions which were shared between the employees. So there are three dimensions on which the feedback was given to employees. The competencies were achieving results, developing the business, and working with people. And if you'll see, the organization's view on all of them was developing the business was getting the maximum feedback to say that people need to improve on this as an organization. If you see under those, there were different behaviors which were there. So being business savvy, developing self, functional know-how, innovation, and planning and organizing. If you look at the weakest point was planning and organizing, which was coming through as a point which needs to be improved in the organizations. So the organizations, once they started getting this kind of feedback, started working on this vector, and there was a clear indication of saying if you improve this, in developing the business, which is a real outcome on revenue, could improve. And the managers started looking at the performance scorecard for self, the team scorecard, and individual scorecard for various team members. Month-on-month progress was being tracked on individuals' view on performance from various people. So started looking at who are the people who need to work on developing the business and where was it going. The outcomes were that they were able to focus on a particular element of planning and organizing and help various individuals. Since it was a small organization, the help was very handy, and supervisors can spend time one-on-one to help improve that. And there were actionable real-time conversations which happened, and a 360-degree view was shared, not only the employee, the manager's view, and around the year development planning tracking progress helped improve developing the business as a vector. So that is how this can be done. It's a since I don't have the full time, the full case can be discussed in detail on one of the days, or if anybody is interested, they can send me an email separately for me to have either a conversation with them or talk to them separately on this. So I take a pause again here, Kashish, and hand it over to you to ask any more questions if you have.
Yes, we do have one question again from Deepak Sharma, and he asks, "What's the opinion on EEC, SBI feedback models when giving feedback?" This is new for me, so yeah.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that model. If you can elaborate it or you can send it, what exactly is that model? I can perhaps look it up and get back to him because I'm not familiar with that model.
Sure, I'll arrange for this communication to be done.
Sure.
Another question is from Amit Sharma, and he says, "We've observed that managers don't usually own the feedback and point to skip level managers for any critical feedback. How to train people, managers, on the art of feedback?" Okay, so what he's saying is that line managers don't usually own the feedback that they're giving to their team members, and they always direct their teams to the skip level managers for any critical feedback.
Hello, Kashish?
Some way to train people managers on the art of giving feedback.
Yeah, there is, of course, a lot of one-on-ones are done. Many organizations arrange for. Sorry, give me a second. They arrange for formal training sessions for employees or continuously telling people, and especially through HR, that the feedback which is coming to you is your manager's responsibility, even if it is coming from the skip level. It is your manager believes in it. That's why he's giving you that particular feedback. And that conversation should be held through employee town halls or whenever you're doing a town hall on performance management for the organization. Many organizations have specific town halls after every performance feedback cycle. And they talk about saying that the feedback which is coming to you or the decisions of the rating which is coming to you is squarely your manager's responsibility and nobody else's.
Right. We have a question from Anu Agarwal, and she says, "How can we build employees and employer feedback environment? How can we build a feedback environment for the employees as well as the employer where both are involved?"
Well, that's a tough one. I don't think we can skin the cat in a particular way. I think
Right.
it starts with if I was to skin that cat, I would start with first being the leadership team being honest with each other rather than with anybody else in the organization. So it'll be the CEO and the leadership team who should have a 360-degree done on them, and that's how the feedback culture will start. It's always top down. The
Absolutely.
feedback and the performance management cannot be driven bottom up. It has to be top down.
Very true. We have a question from Mr. Prabodh Surur, and he says, "How would you take feedback, especially when people hesitate to give negative feedback?" He's focused on taking the feedback rather than giving.
I think one of the things I learned very early in my career is that, and it's very difficult though. I learned it around 12, 13 years ago. Is that when somebody gives feedback, you say thank you. That's the first word which should come out of your mouth, rather than, oh, but you didn't see me in that particular light, or I was different. Because if you do that, that's your self-affirmation bias which is coming into play. Nothing wrong with it. It will come for the few times, but you should train yourself in the first word which should come out of your mouth is thank you. I didn't know that I behaved like that, or I did not know that I come across like that. So thank you for reflecting that. And then you should start asking him questions, which is clarificatory questions, not defensive questions. The clarification question could be, okay, when you saw me doing that, what did you feel? How it felt to you? And have you seen me engaging in that behavior often? Was it one-off? What do you think? Other people see me in the same light, or is it that I come across like that only to you? So clarification questions rather than saying a denial question. So to say.
Right. We have another question from Anand Raj. I think he's working with a startup. So he asks, what is the effective performance management system for a startup?
Oh, a startup is a clean slate. It's a beautiful time to build a performance management system. I would highly recommend you to read Mark Efron and his views on one-page talent management. He's beautifully elucidated it. And if you're a startup, I think you should immediately see if you can look at some of his systems and some of the apps which are coming into play because you have the opportunity to build a futuristic system rather be seeped in the old reality. So I would encourage you to look at apps like Reflective, Karma Notes, and Impraise for building a performance management system. And some of the processes you should be simple and one page, not more than that. The goals should be more, not every person should not have more than any person in the organization should not have more than 5 goals. Now there are many things you can do right, and it's a beautiful opportunity.
Sure. The next question is from Srinivas.
Yeah, go ahead.
And he asks, are there different type of feedback mechanisms for different levels of staff? Or there's just one mechanism that applies to every level?
No, there are different. So, for example, many organizations don't want to do a 360-degree at the junior level. They feel that the directness of feedback from the supervisor works best. Well, yes and no. If the supervisors have been trained well, then yes. If they have not been trained, it's like any other skill. They actually screw up. Pardon my language in giving feedback. If you were to ask me and give me a free hand to build any system, I would suggest that a system which is 360-degree from first line manager onwards is the best system. The individual contributors, you can have a kind of a 180, which is the peers and the supervisor giving some kind of feedback. But first line managers onwards, that should be the system. For individual contributors, it will be the manager and some other customers who should be able to give feedback.
Right. Next question is from Vishal Setia, and he asks, bell curve or 360 degree, which one is best in performance measurement? Good old bell curve.
Bell curve is needed for rewards, not for measuring performance. For measuring performance, you should be able to build a 360, but for giving out rewards, you will have to follow some kind of system, whether it is ranking, whether it is bell curve, whether it is rating. You will have to, because at the end of the day, the budgets are limited and you cannot equate everybody. If you do a socialist company, well, then it's a different company than a capitalist organization. If you're running a capitalist organization, then you've got to have some kind of ranking method or a reward mechanism method.
There is another question by Anu Agarwal, seems to be quite technical kind of a question. So she's asking the designing tools of feedback pertaining to industry or domain. So probably what she means to ask is any designing tools for feedback that you would be able to recommend depending on the industry or domain that they operate in.
In my experience, it doesn't matter what industry you are in. You're actually giving feedback to human beings. And it doesn't matter whether the human beings work for the government or for IT or for manufacturing. We all are human beings at the end of the day, and we all don't like feedback. None of us likes feedback. It is, as I said, you have to train yourself to say thank you after every feedback. Otherwise, it's extremely difficult. And there is the mechanism and the tools remain the same, whichever industry you work for.
Right. Radha Sharma is curious to know whether 360-degree or competency mapping or a combination, which is the most prevalent or preferred way of measuring performance currently?
Actually, 360-degree is based on behaviors. Many organizations have behaviors measured through a competency framework, and that behavior and competency framework is actually used for doing a 360. So you will have to ultimately use the behaviors. So you can use a 360, or many organizations use a what and a how. The what is the performance, and how is all about your behavior. How did you achieve the results? So classic example of it is that I can be a very high performance branch with if you're a branch, whatever branch it is, manufacturing could be a great unit, sales, it could be a branch, which could be a service branch. I could be great performance, but I could have very high attrition. Now, would you give me rewards for attrition, or would you give me, sorry, would you not give me awards because my attrition is high, or would you give me rewards because my performance is good? Now, that's a classical dilemma, right? And
Absolutely.
many organizations are actually saying that we want to measure both.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next question is from Veer Bharat, and he is asking, in some countries and cultures, it is uncommon for managers to rate employees or to give or to give direct feedback, particularly if some points are negative. What is your thought on multinational organizations culture?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's not only organizations, it's also countries. So many countries which are very hierarchical in nature, it's extremely difficult to change their mindset to anything of 360. I would be very cautious if I was to do anything in countries where the culture is very hierarchical, and a 360 may not work there. So you'll have to tread very, very carefully in some of those cultures, including some organizations. If I were you, I will build a case by saying how the world is moving. Give time to the organizations. It is not going to be an easy task. It will take 2 to 3 years for you to start, changing the course of the performance management in those organizations.
Thank you for answering that. Mirza Beg asks, 360 data feedback can be on the values of the organization or should it be mapped with the competencies?
Well, actually, both. You can have 360 on both. You can have 360 on values, and I would strongly advise that to be used as recognition rather than reward. And the competencies and the behavior 360 can be used for rewards. So you need to separate the reward and the recognition mechanism.
Great, thank you so much, Rajan. I think these were all the questions from our attendees. I don't see any more questions coming in. So I did observe that some of the attendees joined us a little later during the webinar. So I would be summing up the webinar for them. But before we do that, there's a humble request from me as well as from the entire core HRIR team. We would be sending you feedback requests. It is just a 4 or 5 questions questionnaire, which will only take about 2 minutes or even less than that. Do a lot of encouragement and would give us some insight into how your experience was. And you can always give us suggestions on to what topics you would like to see in future webinars, or if you have any suggestions in how we can improve the entire experience, maybe in terms of technology that we're using or in terms of the way we conduct it. How can we make it more lively, more encouraging and more enthusiastic for you? So please do watch out for the feedback links, which will be mailing to you in a short while from now. And to sum up today's webinar for people who joined a little later, I think one tagline or the main point that we learned from today's webinar is that regular feedback is here to stay. The way it has started to impact the productivity of the organizations are waking up to it, and it is here to stay, and it will improve the way organizations work, and HR should get comfortable with it. We all should make efforts to learn the nuances of regular feedback. And it is, of course, possible. It works and it can transform the organizations. Apart from that, I think one point which I certainly did note very clearly was that it is very likely to give the employees a lot of confidence and affirmation in what they're doing currently, what they're doing well, and what are the areas of improvement, which direction they really need to work on, they need to improve. So instead of just pointing out what is not working, the regular feedback would also, I think, would offer tips and suggestions on how to make it better, how to make their performance better. It would create better team member and manager relationships. I think most of us are aware that the number one reason that employees leave is because of their relationship with the managers. So the employees do not leave their company, they leave the managers. So if we see the manager and the team member relationship improving because of this constant communication and regular feedback mechanism, where an employee is more aware on how they need to work to reach a certain goal, it will really help in retaining a lot of talent in the organization. And it would also reduce any guesswork or grapevine, because it will provide the people with very clear directions, the consistent assessments, or the appreciations, or as we discussed earlier, areas of improvement and suggestions on how they can improve their work. It will really be a great asset. Regular feedback mechanism will be a great asset. And to leverage this great asset, you have Rajan Kalia, the expert in the area, to reach out to. So I think today's session was an eye opener for some of us, because we were not really aware of the concept of regular feedback. For some of us, yes, we might have heard about it, but today we got to know the nuances and the way it functions. So thank you, a heartful thank you, and a grateful thanks to Rajan Kalia, who shared his knowledge, experience, and expert views on the transformational potential of regular feedback mechanism. It was really a very useful and enlightening session with him. I think on behalf of the entire core HRIR team, I would like to thank Rajan for sparing his valuable time for us. Apart from that, I would also like to thank the entire core team, which is led by Veer, supported immensely by Bhanu, Jyoti, Anu, and Kirti. And special thanks to the attendees and many more people who are behind the scenes, who have supported us and helped us come through this far since January 2017. And I hope we will be making more greater strides in the future if we have your continued support. So thank you, all of you. We will not be able to move forward without your support. Thanks, Rajan. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend ahead.
Thank you, Kashish. I really enjoyed being here. All the very
Thank you.
best.
Staying with us. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.